Hi, everyone. I'm going to be sharing my screen with a presentation, so just give me 1 second. There we go. Got it. All right. All right, let me see. Can someone give me just like a head nod if you see my presentation? Yes, great. Well, hi everyone. My name's Deanna Dupuis, like Melinda said, and if I haven't got a chance to meet you, I'm a comprehensive planner and a member of the Energize Our Neighborhoods team. And I first want to say thank you so much for, I want to say thank you so much for everyone to come, taking time out of your day to learn a little bit about comprehensive and neighborhood planning. I'm excited to be kicking off the EnergizED series about planning. As we transitioned, hold on 1 sec. Sorry. Oh, there we go. All right, as we've transitioned to this virtual world, I wanted to start a little bit sharing a bit about myself and why I'm a planner. I am the daughter of a construction worker, and from an early age, I had a curiosity about how cities are built. I spent a lot of time with my dad at different project sites and learned, that some houses were big, some houses were small, some streets had sidewalks, others didn't. And it shaped it made me question, how do we create great places for people to live? And that's kind of followed me throughout my career. I'm also a lifelong runner, and I feel like that gives me a really unique perspective of seeing a city by foot and understanding what makes it easy for someone to travel by foot, or also what makes it stressful or difficult. But I didn't actually intend to be a planner with my career. I started my education as an elementary school teacher, and I taught in a very low income, segregated elementary school in Dallas, Texas. And I quickly noticed and got frustrated that my students and their parents were excluded from a lot of the opportunities that their more affluent neighbors had access to, whether it be open space within their neighborhoods, grocery stores, nice, good new housing. And that led me to kind of want to work within the government to figure out ways to create better communities for all people. And that being having access to decent housing, open space, these amenities that we cherish when we call, a livable neighborhood, and making sure everyone has that access. And that's why I really do love my job of getting to work with neighborhoods through the neighborhood plan process to identify, what do people want in their neighborhoods and what can help them be successful. So that's a little bit about myself. And now we're going to kind of jump into the meat of why I do what I do and what I'm doing on a daily basis. We'll be discussing comprehensive planning, what it is and why we do it. Then I'm going to give a very quick overview of Blueprint Boise. If anyone has seen the document, it's a 200-page document. So it is not my intent to cover every fact of Blueprint Boise. I will not be able to do that today. But it's to give you the framework. So if you do have a specific question, you'll be able to pull out. Sorry, real quick, mine is just automatically advancing my slides. So hopefully this is not going to happen. But all right, quickly. Sorry. So my goal is that you'll be able to look within Blueprint Boise and find the answers. That I'll have given you the structure so you could know what's up in the document. Then we'll go quickly over neighborhood planning, what it is and how we do it at the city of Boise. So I would like everyone to imagine the comprehensive plan like a recipe. This is kind of one of the best analogies I could think of, where when we're working off of a recipe, we know what the end goal is, right? In this case, it's shrimp tacos. And then it gives us a list of all the things we need to make the shrimp tacos. And then it gives us step-by-step directions on how to achieve our goal. That's really similar to what a comprehensive plan is in the most simple level. We always have our why, which is our vision. In the comparison to the shrimp tacos, that's You know, that's the shrimp tacos. That's the actual beautiful image of the food we're going to try to make. Then we have the what. Those are the things we need. Like I said, that's our ingredients. And the how is the actual specific directions of how we're going to achieve that. So if we're thinking about that in terms of a city, if our vision is a city for everybody, what are the things that we need to be a city for everyone? We need transportation options, housing options, a clean environment. So those are our goals. We're going to have goals around those elements that make a city for everyone. And then the how is, how are we going to actually have a clean environment? Those are those specific policies and actions we take to make sure we're reaching our goals that help us achieve our vision. And, you know, to me, that makes sense. I'm a planner, and that's, you know, you don't wake up every day and decide, what am I going to do? You know, we're all working towards something. So we do that because it makes good sense, but also we're required by state law to do comprehensive planning as a local jurisdiction. And so it's our Local Land Use Planning Act actually requires local jurisdictions to comprehensively plan and then to implement that plan through the adoption of ordinances. And again, I'm going to come back to cooking. I see this as the Local Land Use Planning Act is telling us you can have a great recipe, but it doesn't really mean much unless you have the tools to implement that great recipe. So you can't really cook the shrimp tacos unless you have the pots, the pans, the knife, the things you actually need to get it going. The recipe is just a guide, but we really need that support, those tools to implement it. That's similar with the comprehensive plan. We can have a really great vision and clearly identify the directions and the steps we need to take, but there's a lot of other municipal tools that help us implement our plan. Whether it's, you know, if one of our goals is walkability and we want to build sidewalk, you need to allocate the funds to build the sidewalk. Same with if we have walkable environment and we want new development within the city that is walkable, our zoning ordinance, which is the law that regulates how we use land, should be supporting that. I'm not going to be spending time talking about these tools such as the zoning ordinance today. That will be for the next session of the EnergizED series, but just to kind of give you guys some perspective, you can have the plan, but we also need the mechanisms to implement it. And so this is just a summary of what we've been discussing and maybe using a little bit more planning language. A comprehensive plan sets our vision, and its focus is on how we use the built environment. So that's, you know, actually the land we see out front of our windows, how we're going to use that built environment in the future, and how it's going to impact residents, the environment, and the economy. We've identified the goals and policies that will help us achieve that vision. We have a blueprint for how to use the land, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And this serves as the basis for zoning other policies and programs that we'll implement throughout the city. And this is what I see as one of the important parts, is that in an ideal world, the comprehensive plan is not created by technical experts and we tell you exactly what the vision for the city is. The comprehensive plan is created by engaging the entire public on what is our shared vision for the future and how will the city, you know, how should the city grow and change in 20 years from now. And so we'll work with the public to identify that vision, and planners can then help translate, you know, if we dream of this, what are all the steps we need to take to get that? Boise has been completing comprehensive plans for several decades, beginning as early as the 60s. And our newest iteration is Blueprint Boise, which we began the process to develop that in 2007 with the adoption in 2011. This was before I joined the city, but these are a variety of tactics we used to engage the public as we drafted the plan. Things like project websites, public meetings, they worked with a neighborhood council, different tactics like that. And so with that engagement, we were to create the Blueprint Boise document, and these are the major components that are found within the document, and I'm going to be going over each of these components next. So the plan starts with our vision for how Boise will be, how it will change within the future. And when I look at the vision, you know, several things stand out to me, such as valued neighborhoods, economic vitality, sustainability, and this idea that we're going to plan to support healthy, productive, and meaningful lives for our residents. The vision ends with the statement, Boise will be known for, and then it includes 7 principles. And these principles center around the environment, our development pattern, neighborhoods, transportation, culture, the economy, and safety. And those 7 principles then become the framework for chapter 2, which is our citywide goal and policy areas. It's exactly the same language as it was in the vision, where it talks about environmental stewardship, our predictable development pattern and such. So with this, we create goals centered on these topics and identified policies that will help us achieve our goal, that will balance, build back up to our big vision. So if I were a neighborhood member or, anyone who had a question about, well, what's the city of Boise's long-term plans for, sorry, it keeps on going too quick. What's the city of Boise's long-term plans for environmental stewardship? This would be a chapter I would recommend looking at, seeing what our goals are and our policies that we've identified for that, or same with, what is our vision of the economy in the future, and so forth. Then chapter 3 is our community structure and design. And if you're a neighborhood member who is familiar with the development process, I'm sure you have seen this map. This is our land use map. And really it's the future land use map. So when we were developing Blueprint Boise, we identified all the different types of ways we use land across the city, and also ways and types of land use we would want in the future, and identified those and placed them on a map. So, most cities have industrial land. And so we then found a location where we felt industrial land would be appropriate. So if you see down by the airport, there's a lot of gray, which is where we've identified as appropriate for a more industrial uses. There's also quite a bit of yellow, that's the suburban land use. And when we were doing the planning for this, they identified that as an appropriate location for suburban land use. Once we have identified the land uses, there's actually within this chapter design principles. And so the hope here would be that the design principles help us evaluate if new development within these areas are supporting the intent. And especially if you're someone trying to evaluate whether or not a proposed project in your neighborhood has good design, this may be a good place to start by looking at those design principles. Some examples of that would be connectivity. So if there's a new subdivision in your neighborhood, in Blueprint Boise, we strongly suggest that there should be bike and ped pathways to connect from one subdivision to the next. And when I say bike and ped, like walkways, pathways of that nature. So you can connect from one subdivision to the next, or you can easily walk to a grocery store. Also, we have it where we want new buildings to be pedestrian scale. So if new development, we don't want to encourage just a giant garage in the front, but we want to be able to see the front door. So those are some examples of design principles that are found within this chapter. Then we have in chapter 4, our planning area policies. And so this really recognizes that there are the city is very large, and not all places within the city are the same and should be treated the same. The foothills may have completely different needs than the Southwest, and vice versa. So in this chapter, we identify trends and key issues of those planning areas. So for example, the foothills or neighborhoods adjacent to the foothills may have wildfire concerns. This is where we would acknowledge that difference. And then there are specific policies focused on the activity centers, which are, commercial centers or community hubs within the neighborhood. Policies focused on corridors. So Park Center may be an important corridor for the Southeast, Vista for the Central Bench, and specific neighborhood related policies. We also have recommendations for connectivity, public services and facilities, and neighborhood character found within this chapter. Give me a sec, this is not advancing. There we go. So then we end the chat, we end Blueprint Boise with our action plan. And this is the way that we take all of those actions and policies and collect them together in a way that we can see, okay, what is our immediate next steps? This is the directions part of the recipe. And here's just an example of our neighborhood's goal area where they say update the neighborhood planning framework. They identify the agency or entity responsible. So PDS is Planning and Development Services, which is my department. And then they give a year time frame of how long it should take for us to achieve this action or to accomplish this action. And the goal with the action plan is it's not that it just sits on the shelf and it's like, all right, here's the to-do list. We'll come back to it in 20 years. The hope is that we're constantly referring to it and evaluating, are we making progress towards this vision? This is an example of an evaluation we did a couple years ago to see how much progress have we made at Blueprint Boise. So green means that we have accomplished it or we're making strides towards achieving this. Yellow means we're making progress. And then red means we haven't yet tackled this. So that's Blueprint Boise in a very, very quick, short nutshell. There is tons more information in there, and I would be happy to answer questions at the end of this about this or set up a time to talk in more depth. The hope was that it really just gives you the framework of kind of where to look if you have a specific question in that large document. Now we're going to move on to neighborhood plans. And we're going to cover quickly just what is a neighborhood plan, the neighborhood plan process, and then if you are going to begin a neighborhood plan or are curious to begin one, what are some steps you can do to prepare for the process? So previously I asked you to think of the neighborhood plan as a recipe. Now I want you to think of it, I asked you to think of it as the comprehensive plan as a recipe. Now I would like you to think of the comprehensive plan as a book of recipes, right? This recipe book shows tacos. So it's a book of all the ways you can make tacos. We know we can make shrimp tacos, fish tacos, beef tacos. So there's many different ways to make a taco. And so if we're now going to think these unique recipes are a neighborhood plan, right? There's many different ways to get tacos. Right? There's many different ways to make a city for everyone. So each neighborhood could have their own plan to achieve that main big city vision. So it has it has the exact same structure as a neighborhood plan conceptually. A neighborhood plan will have a vision. The why are we doing this? It has the goals. What do we need to accomplish our vision? And how do we get it implemented? Of course, these are unique for that specific neighborhood. So, not all neighborhoods are the same. They're all going to have a little bit of a different vision. Then once we've kind of had that structure, you could expect to find within a neighborhood plan, and this, especially in our previous neighborhood plans, are all spelt out a little bit different or named differently, but we always give a description of what is the neighborhood today, whether it's an analysis of their existing demographic conditions, their assets, so what are the parks, the schools, the transit access within the neighborhood currently, and then what's the planning context that's shaping it. So what are the plans that have already been done that affect the neighborhood? We included what I call the basis for action. So it should be a very clear description of all the public engagement that has happened to create the neighborhood plan. And so if you're a person who says, how did I get my voice heard? You could turn to this chapter and know all the times that the public was engaged in the process and how they actually shape the outcomes of the plan. And then the next would be that the bread and butter of the plan, which is the vision, the goals, and the projects. What does the neighborhood want to be? How do we get there? What do we need to get there? And then what are the actual projects that we can take or the steps that we can take to make sure we're working towards the vision. Sometimes we hear, is a neighborhood plan even useful? If we already have a city comprehensive plan, like, do we need another plan? Well, it is useful. I believe strongly that it's useful because it serves as a communication link. So it's a time for the city to really partner with the neighborhood to meet them where they are and to have a good communication, a good discussion. Say, what are our needs from a neighborhood perspective? What is the city's need from the city's perspective? And how can we make these mesh? And how can we understand each other better? It also serves as a baseline. So we do a lot of data collection during a neighborhood plan process, and it's documented. And then we can consistently be reevaluating or looking back on the plan to see how have we changed? Are we making progress in the way that we want to be making progress? It also serves as a recommendation. As new land uses occur within the city, the neighborhood plan is really that snapshot to say, we asked our neighborhood and we engaged them on really important questions, and this was the neighborhood's recommendation. This is what we wanted you to consider when you have to make decisions. So it's their recommendations. Of course, this is not the law. It's not the knife that cuts the bread. It's not the tool. It's our recommendation. It's our guide for what we would like to do. It also serves as a project list. A lot of neighborhoods could use this as a way to kind of a to-do list. We should do X, Y, Z the first year. These are the projects we should apply for through the neighborhood investment program. Now, if you've identified locations for public art, that's a great way to strengthen your application for a neighborhood investment program, to say it's in our neighborhood plan, or we identified this crosswalk as incredibly urgent. ACHD, please make this your #1 project. And then it's also an informational tool. You don't have to only read your neighborhood's plan. You could read every other neighborhood's, and it's a good way just to learn more about the diversity of neighborhoods within our great city. So there's lots of people who are involved in a neighborhood plan, and this is just a quick list of some of the roles and responsibilities. There's typically a comprehensive planner or a neighborhood planner that's assigned to help the neighborhood along. Someone like myself who would serve as the project manager to coordinate with other city departments. We work with Parks and Rec, Arts and History, to make sure that we have all the most up-to-date information that we can have. It also, the comprehensive planner can assist with the writing of the plan and data analysis. We also work with a neighborhood planning committee. We've had very small groups up to people, groups of 10 to 15. And these are the people who are really driving the ship, right? They're the ones helping to write the plan, guide all of the content, make sure we're going in the right direction. They're charged with representing the diverse needs and interests of the neighborhood. The plan is really as strong as this group is, and as committed as this group is, really helps the plan be successful. We also work with our neighborhood associations. So far, most of our neighborhood plans have aligned perfectly with the neighborhood association boundaries. So the neighborhood association will select members to serve on the planning committee. They also help to advertise, and they attend all of our meetings. They do a lot of great work to make sure that we're reaching the neighborhood as a whole. Neighborhood associations also have the opportunity to adopt the completed plan. We also just have the neighborhood, and that's, every single person who lives in your neighborhood is invited and encouraged to attend and participate, with all public meetings and other outreach events. We also want to make sure that the neighborhood has the opportunity to read the draft plan and can submit comments. The neighborhood plan process usually takes about 12 months, sometimes longer. We're hopefully getting better every time we do it, but we don't want to make it too fast because you don't want to miss anyone when you're going throughout the process. But we typically start with the learn phase, where we're figuring out, more about the neighborhood and asking those questions about what do you love, what are your concerns, things of that nature, to learn more about the neighborhood. Then we move to our vision. So going from what about today to what about tomorrow? What's your big idea for the future? How should we change if we have to change? What must we protect as we change? So we ask a lot of those visioning questions to be able to draft our vision. And then we move into the create phase, which is where we take that feedback from the public to create our vision, and then really get down into the weeds and pull out, what are our goals? What do we need to achieve this vision? What are all the different strategies and actions that we can take to make sure that we're going along the right way? This phase is difficult because we're really at this point coordinating with all the agencies and all the decision makers to make sure that this is something that is achievable and workable. And then once that's all done, we finalize the plan, make sure it reads the way that the planning committee feels that it's correct, that represents the voice of the neighborhood, and it's also something that represents the needs of the city. And we finalize it and make it a public document and have it goes and gets adopted by the neighborhood association, goes to planning and zoning, and then would be adopted by city council. As you can see at the bottom of this timeline, there's these yellow boxes that say MPC. So we're working with the neighborhood planning committee all along. So it's not like the city is just writing the plan. Our hope is that we're always sharing and iterating with the neighborhood planning committee. They're also the ones helping us decide what is the right type of public engagement to do, what type of survey questions should we do. So that they're really our sounding board to make sure we're getting it right. And they're usually very committed, and they work very hard to make sure that it's representative of the neighborhood. Then we also have, you'll see these teal color conversation bubbles. The goal here, and we're getting better at this every single time we do a neighborhood plan, is that we're engaging the neighborhood along the way. We don't wait till we wrote the plan to say, here neighborhood, how does this sound? That we're doing workshops throughout the process to make sure we ask them the question, we say, did we hear you right? Now help us answer this next question. Did we hear you right? Help us answer the next question. So we're getting a lot better at that, and to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to give their voice and that we're being transparent along the way. And when I say, we go out to the neighborhood public, there's lots of ways we can do this, and we're also trying to get better at all the ways we can do this. There's always a public meeting. Sometimes it's at an elementary school or a middle school where we have boards and activities. We've also done like a block party where we closed down a street in front of a neighbor's house, and we were able to catch traffic as they drove home or rode their bikes home, and they were able to stop and participate in that public meeting. That it was a public meeting, but we kind of made it seem like a fun block party, but also capture data on what they liked. Right now we have out sandwich boards in the north end because we're doing a neighborhood plan process in the north end, where we're directing them to take an online survey because of COVID-19 has made it harder or more difficult to have public meetings. So there's lots of different ways we can do it, and that's where we work with the neighborhood planning committee to find the most appropriate way. One thing though that we do try to always include is like postcards. So the city will try to send out postcard mailers to make sure we're getting people at their homes. So that's kind of the typical process where as we do each neighborhood plan, we're getting better and better, hopefully getting better. But there's a lot of things you can do as a neighborhood member if you're even not currently in the process of getting a plan completed. So what we've noticed is neighborhoods that are well organized help us, are really successful with the neighborhood plan process. So even if it's having a list of email addresses of people who typically attend your meetings, that way when we start the neighborhood plan process, we can say, hi, we're starting this, and send out an email to get more attention towards the process. We've also found that neighborhoods that do listening sessions, so when they can come to the city and say, these are the 5 things we hear constantly from our neighborhood members. It's going to be traffic, housing, parks, so we have that strong idea, and they've already identified some of the big issues that a neighborhood plan should try to address. And we also just love when neighborhood members have already done some visual documentation, whether it's taking photos or keeping track of areas. So if they say, we really like this type of new development, or we don't like this style of new development, having that visual documentation, really, to be corny, but it says 1,000 words. To have those pictures already done helps the process a lot. So I know I went through a ton of information, and I tend to be a pretty quick speaker, so sorry if I did go fast, but I'm happy to answer any questions now if there are any in the chat. You can also always email me or call me, or any of my colleagues. Kathleen Lacey has done many of the other neighborhood plans in the city. I also have on the left-hand side of the screen, I think it's left, other links. So we have a link about Blueprint Boise, so you could actually access the document online, as well as you can access our information about neighborhood planning online. So with that, yeah, I'm happy to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Deanna. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat yet. So if anybody does have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
And actually also, I think I noticed several people who have previously been involved in neighborhood plans. So if you even want to, give any comment, I think I saw Erica on here, who she just was a crucial member of the Northwest Neighborhood Plan Committee. So just there, it really does. We try our best to involve the neighborhood, and so many people have done a lot of great work with these neighborhood plans.
I have a question, Dina.
Mm-hmm.
Does the city have a strategy on what area they're going to focus their time on to build neighborhood plans?
Mm-hmm.
So that if a neighborhood doesn't have a plan or doesn't have an updated plan, is there a schedule there that the city is already working on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Betty. Yes, so we have done, and this is actually we have data. I think I actually have a slide on this. Let's see. I don't think I have a slide. I think I got rid of it. But we do annually, myself and the other neighborhood planners and comprehensive planners, we look at a lot of data. So exactly what you said. First and foremost, we look at who has a current neighborhood plan. A neighborhood plan is considered old if it's older than 10 to 15 years. So even if your neighborhood did one in 1995, that would be too old. So we would look at that, and we prioritize neighborhoods who don't have neighborhood plans. So exactly, that would give a priority. We also look at other topics such as livability. So do you have access to parks in your neighborhood? If you don't have access to a park in your neighborhood, maybe that would be lower. That would make it more urgent need for a neighborhood plan. If you've experienced a lot of population increase, that may make it more urgent need for a neighborhood plan. So there's several different data points that we look at to help us prioritize neighborhoods.
Thanks, Deanna. We have a couple questions from the chat coming through.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go ahead and read them. And Deanna, I don't know if you can speak to these. If not, I'm happy to kind of take note of that and do some research on the back end if there's something we need to. So our first question here is from Diane Ronaine. She's asking, Blueprint Boise is 9 or more years old. When were the current zoning ordinances passed that enforce that?
So great question, great question. Our current zoning ordinance dates back to the 60s. So it was probably written after our very, very first comprehensive plan. And our approaches to planning and our approaches to cities have changed since then. It's a lot easier to write a new plan than it is to change the zoning ordinance. And that would be my thought of why the zoning ordinance hasn't changed as often as our comprehensive plan has changed. So when were the current? Yeah, so I think that answers that. We've amended the zoning ordinance frequently since then. I think we most recently amended it last year to do new development noticing procedures. We amended the zoning ordinance 2 years ago about our accessory dwelling unit standards. So we've been amending it slightly as new issues come up, but we haven't done a comprehensive look at the ordinance as a whole. I don't think in a long time. After Blueprint Boise was adopted in 2011, we did a reorganization of the document as a whole, but we didn't substantially change the content of the zoning ordinance.
Thanks, Deanna. Kind of along those same lines as a follow-up question, should the comprehensive plan be updated before the zoning ordinance is redone?
I would say that's not so much a question I personally can answer. The comprehensive plan has a 20 to 30 year lifespan. Some people say 20. So, I mean, we're like midway through the lifespan of Blueprint Boise before it would get an update. I think that a lot of the personally, when I read the vision, it seems very much aligned with our political, our political direction from the mayor and council. So.
Thank you. So we have another question here, part of which you kind of already touched on, but what is the typical cost of a new neighborhood plan and how often are they recommended to be updated?
So right now we work with a consultant to help us write the neighborhood plan. And usually usually the price has been around $30,000 to $50,000, depending on the size of the neighborhood, where we ask for that through the neighborhood investment program. Like I said, a neighborhood plan has a lifespan of 10 to 15 years, so it's a little shorter than a comprehensive plan, just because we do a little bit more concrete project lists. But again, we are trying to give priority to neighborhoods that have never had a neighborhood plan, but I would recommend it gets updated, within every 15 years.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have another question here. It says, why does the comprehensive plan not identify the adopted ordinances aligned with the policies? By doing so, this is not transparent in allowing the citizens to understand what's a law versus just a future goal.
I think that's a great suggestion for an improved comprehensive plan, if I'm understanding it correctly. Okay. Am I answering that question? I don't disagree. I just don't have the right answer for that.
We can absolutely follow up after.
Yeah.
We need to, for sure. Okay, here's another question coming. It says, can neighborhoods that cover a large area have multiple neighborhood plans within the same neighborhood association?
We would do that on a case-by-case basis. I don't inherently see a reason no, especially if it's a big area where a lot of change could occur. We would look at a lot of different indicators of, is this specific area need more attention than the larger? You can also have a bigger area for a neighborhood plan and then focus on a specific area. A lot of other neighborhood plans, if you have a big area that is going to change, or say the city owns a big portion of the property within the neighborhood, you could focus on that area.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question for you. Do you need to be a neighborhood association board member to be on a neighborhood planning committee?
No, we're working harder on opening up the neighborhood planning committee to be open to anyone who is willing to make the commitment and that can be representative of the neighborhood. Often we find that board members are very committed to their neighborhood, but you don't have to be a board member.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see. We have another question here that says, the LUPA specifically says, quote, not in conflict with the policies of the comp plan, end quotes. And Boise code also says policies, but the project reports produced by PDS for a development proposal tend to focus on goals and principles of the comp plan, which technically are not what the LUPA mandates. Can you speak to that?
I hate to pass the buck on this one, but maybe that could be, I don't know the answer to that. I think maybe Ethan, when we do our zoning 101, where a current planner, I'm a comprehensive planner, but a current planner can reference the difference, or I can follow up on that.
Great, thanks. We'll plan to follow up, no problem. Okay, let's see. Another question here. What steps do you recommend interested neighborhood members take if or when a more recent and reflective of existing neighborhood plan does not match the zoning that may have been created and imposed on a neighborhood in the 70s? So what steps can they take now if their plan doesn't match the zoning necessarily in their neighborhood?
Yeah, I think that really does, I think the biggest thing would be to be advocating, especially with our city council, so that we can get direction to better align our zoning with the plans. We work with, you know, if you want to initiate or adjust the zoning to that, we work from getting that political direction. So I think that's a great way to start advocating that we're better aligned with our plans. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We have another question here that says, our neighborhood is one of those that has an old plan.
I created other projects, so I will take it out of here, which means I'll have to rearrange some other things.
If you mute yourself, that would be great.
This computer science program will go, and ISTEM will go, and then I can cut this down too, because we just won't have as many classes this year. That's going to be, so we'll make it work. I just need to get numbers.
Do you mind?
Okay. I'll do this. Do I need to have Carolyn approve the survey? I'm not sending out to all schools. I'm only sending it to the people that are using.
Sorry, Deanna, I think
I can't figure it out. Sorry. Is this me?
I don't know why Carolyn would even need to look at it. There's no messaging in it. It's just an ask for data.
Yeah.
So I think you're
the
fine.
program, but it might not.
So can
Just
I
run by
say a
her.
statement like,
Okay, I think I figured it out.
Sorry
Sorry if
about
I was making a terrible face when I'm trying to do the computer work.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to go back and start that question from the beginning here. Our neighborhood is one of those that has an old neighborhood plan from the 90s. Our board has been reluctant to ask for money for a new plan because we have seen other neighborhood plans disregarded at public hearings, and our plan wasn't followed that well to begin with. Do you feel that more importance is being placed on neighborhood plans now?
I'm not super familiar. I would hope so. I think it does start with a lot of the education and making sure that the neighborhood plan process is truly inclusive and reflective of the neighborhood who, you know, is there. And then we also have to start with the education, especially of our commissions, that, you know, neighborhood plans are, it's that balance to make sure that, hey, this did represent X number of voices, and we went through this year-long process to make sure we were being as inclusive as possible and clearly articulating what our neighborhood wants for itself, and then also educating our commissions about that. I don't know if I could speak to how they were regarded in the past, just because I'm not as familiar with that. But I believe strongly in neighborhood plans, and especially when we have people who, you know, want to find creative solutions to difficult problems and, you know, work together with the city, and us as the city work with the neighborhood to be partners to find those solutions.
Great. Thanks, Deanna. I think that, unless I'm hoping I'm not missing anyone here, questions that have come through. Are there any others?
Sure, I have a couple if it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
When there are holes in the neighborhood groups, whether it's neighborhood associations or people from the neighborhood, sometimes crises emerge, and I know you're aware of some of them. I'm in Southeast Boise, and there's always that question of the relationship between Boise State University and its near neighborhoods. Last year, a group was formed for an overlay district to work with the city. I would take that to be a kind of an effort to try to deal with a neighborhood plan for certain sections of the neighborhoods bordering Boise State. That's been on hold for a long time. We haven't met. I mean, I'm one of the members of that. Meanwhile, Blueprint Boise, in its revision, which is going before the Ada County Highway District next week, as part of the submission of documents, includes a revised BSU plan, master plan, for a few things that have to do with roadway vacations and acquiring some property. We've been at kind of the tail end of the process in SENA, the neighborhood association. But the city has asked for a delay from Ada County Highway District. So you see, I've got multiple things going on here, as I know you do too. And that is, you have the city and neighbors talking amongst themselves, but the city is also trying to get some sort of agreement with Ada County Highway District, with a tug of war going on there. And the planning for what's going to happen in nearby neighborhoods seems to be going over the heads of public discourse. That's been the history. And I realized that there was an effort to try to stop that, but it's, you know, it's like crickets. What's happened to all of our neighborhood planning meetings? You following my question, Deanna? And it's good to see you again, by the way.
Yeah, I can't really speak to, I wasn't leading that effort, and so I can't speak to why it was delayed or more. I think we can get more information on that. I do, speaking to neighborhood plans, we're in a challenging time just because as a whole, the city is changing quickly and it feels very quick. So the hope in an ideal world is that the neighborhood plan has the time to engage the public, and that it serves as kind of this snapshot so that when change happens, you could reference that. It's always harder to be trying to be reactive to a problem, right? It's the goal of the neighborhood plan is to be proactive before there already is an issue, so that we have these principles that we've all agreed on, and then we make decisions based off of the principles of the neighborhood plan. So that would be, it is a challenging situation for the city as a whole as we're changing.
Deanna, we have another question from the chat here. It says, the Planning and Zoning Commission often goes along with neighborhood plans, but the council reverses the commission, citing the old zoning ordinances. It says, this is very frustrating for the neighborhoods. Is the council willing to revise the ordinances to support the current plans instead of the old ones?
I know that there is conversation around, re-evaluating our zoning ordinance and making sure that it's more reflective of our plans and our desires of the neighborhoods now. So I would say definitely participate in that conversation when we're still waiting on direction from the mayor. But if that is the way we go, I think having the neighborhood's voices there to say, look at our plans, consider this work that we've been committed to doing. I think that's very important. It is, I can't speak exactly, I'm not a lawyer, but it is, the ordinance is the law, and sometimes it does put the city in a fear that they're gonna have legal repercussions if they don't follow the law versus a guide, you know, the recipe, the plan. So it would be it would streamline things if we weren't always afraid that they were not in accordance, right? That the plan and the ordinance were aligned. It would probably definitely loosen frustration for some people. But again, I would say is that plans are always up for interpretation. I'm sure everyone knows, you know, I could read one sentence and think it says something. Someone else can read one sentence and think it says something. And that's why we spend a lot of time with the neighborhood plan committee to make sure when they read it, the intent is the intent of the neighborhood. But, you know, that is the hard part about a plan. It is the interpretation, which most things are, that make it challenging.
Thanks, Deanna. Any other questions from anyone? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. If you do think of questions later, I know Deanna shared her contact information there, and you can also always reach us by sending an email to energize@cityofboise.org. So thank you all, and we hope that we'll see you next week. Again, our next EnergizED workshop will focus on zoning. So some of these questions I expect we might see again, or hopefully can address next week. It will be next Wednesday from noon until 1, and we will be back here on Zoom. So thank you all, and thank you, Deanna.
Yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you, Deanna.
Yeah, thanks. It was good to see everyone. I know it's been a while, so good to see you.
Thanks, Melinda.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.